The wild and gentle alien girls in a faraway corner of the galaxy. Two alien girls sat alone, hiding from the world. They had been abandoned by everyone, alien races, humans, and even the stars themselves. Their names, though never spoken aloud, were known only to the empty winds of the planet they had come to call home. They were wild, untamed in a way that frightened the creatures who came across them, and gentle, soft in a way that made others uncomfortable. They were both different, and in a universe full of things trying to fit in, that was a problem. The first girl, with dark braids falling down her back, stood in the shadows of the ruined buildings, looking like she belonged to the night itself. Her eyes glowed a fierce orange, wild and untamable, as if the very fire of the stars had been captured in them. She wore a simple, orange dress, her arms marked with strange tattoos that spoke of battles fought and victories won in ways no one could understand. Her name was Zora, and she was the wild one. She didn't care much for the rules of the world. If you dared to challenge her, she would fight with all the strength she had, showing no mercy. She believed in living without fear, without looking over her shoulder. But even Zora knew she was different, and different meant danger. The second girl, with pale platinum hair that seemed to shimmer in the dim light, was called Lyra. She was the gentle one. Her eyes, a soft and calm blue, spoke of wisdom far beyond her years. She wore a black dress that hugged her figure, its fabric torn at the edges, as if it too had given up fighting against the harsh world around them. Unlike Zora, Lyra would never raise a hand in anger. Her kindness ran so deep that she felt the pain of others as if it were her own. But that kindness, that softness, made her an easy target. People feared what they didn't understand, and Lyra was so different, so kind, that she scared them. She often wished she could change the world to be kinder, to be gentler, but that was never going to happen. Not in a world where survival was all that mattered. Together, they were a strange pair, one wild and untamable, the other gentle and compassionate. Neither of them truly fit in, not with the others of their kind, and not with humans either. Zora fought to survive. Lyra wanted to help. But together they made it through, staying in the shadows, unseen, unnoticed by everyone else. They knew they weren't welcome anywhere. And yet they had each other. Every night, as the stars twinkled above them, they would sit side by side in silence. There was no need for words. Zora would stare up at the sky, her thoughts racing, wondering if there was more to life than this. She dreamed of a world where she could be free, a place where she wouldn't be judged for being who she was. Lyra, on the other hand, would listen to the sounds of the wind, her heart aching for the people she couldn't reach, the world that wouldn't accept her. Sometimes she would reach out to Zora, holding her hand in the dark, offering the comfort of her presence. But comfort was not enough to survive in this world. Their lives had been a cycle of rejection and loneliness, running from danger and hiding, from those who would never accept them. The galaxy was filled with many different creatures, but none of them could understand the alien girls. They were too wild, too gentle, too much of both, and yet never enough to make a difference. The girls spent their days exploring the ruins of the broken city they lived in. It had once been a place of life, but now it was a place of death. Dust and decay filled the air, and broken machines lay scattered in the streets, silent reminders of the world that had come before. The girls had no home, no family, nothing, but each other and the ruins that surrounded them. One day, as they wandered through the old city, something changed. A figure appeared in the distance, walking toward them through the dust. Zora's instincts told her to run, to fight, to protect herself and Lyra, but Lyra felt a strange pull toward the figure. There was something about the way they moved, something that felt different from the others. They weren't hostile, not like the others who had come before. The figure stepped into the light, and for the first time the girls saw him. A human. Zora tensed, ready to fight, but Lyra held her back. "Don't," she whispered. "Not this time." The human didn't look like the others they had encountered. He wasn't afraid of them. He didn't treat them like monsters. He simply stood there, looking at them, as if waiting for them to decide what would happen next. The girls exchanged a glance, unsure. Were they being hunted again? Or was this different? Was this the moment they had been waiting for? Was there, finally, someone who saw them for what they truly were? It wasn't clear yet. But one thing was certain: their lives were about to change. For better or worse. The mysterious human, the silence between the alien girls and the humans stretched out, thick with uncertainty. Zora's fists clenched at her sides, her glowing orange eyes narrowing as she sized him up. She could see no weapons, no signs of hostility. But that didn't mean he wasn't dangerous. The human didn't look like the others, the ones who had rejected them, attacked them, or simply looked away. He wasn't afraid. He didn't flinch when they met his gaze. Lyra, however, felt something different. There was no fear in him, no judgment, just curiosity. Her soft blue eyes studied him, trying to understand what was happening. She felt a strange pull inside her, a feeling she couldn't quite explain. It was as if something inside her recognized him, something deep down, far beyond her gentle nature. "Who are you?" Zora finally growled, her voice a low rumble, her stance still defensive. She wasn't sure what to make of him, but one thing was certain: he wasn't like the others. And that alone made him dangerous in a world where they were constantly hunted or feared. The human stepped closer, his eyes fixed on them, unwavering. He had dark, shaggy hair and wore clothes that seemed out of place in this ruined world. His face was worn with the weight of his own struggles, but his eyes, their deep green, were full of something unexpected, understanding. "I'm no one special," the human said with a slight, almost nervous smile. "Just someone who's been searching for answers." His voice was calm, almost soothing, in stark contrast to the tension in the air. Zora tensed further, and for a moment it seemed as though the moment might snap. She took a step forward, her fists still clenched, ready to fight if she had to. But before she could react, Lyra stepped between them, holding up a hand. "He's not like the others," Lyra whispered, her voice filled with a quiet confidence. "I can feel it." Zora hesitated, her gaze flicking from Lyra to the human and back again. She didn't trust Isley, she never had. But Lyra's calmness, her gentle nature, always seemed to guide them through the roughest situations. Zora, despite her instincts, trusted her. The human took a small step forward, keeping his movements slow and deliberate. "I know you're not like the others," he said softly, his gaze never leaving them. "I've seen you, both of you, from afar. You don't belong here. You don't belong to this world, and this world doesn't deserve you." Zora raised an eyebrow, her skepticism evident. "And you think you do?" "I think I might be the only one who sees you for what you truly are," the human said, his voice steady. "I know you've been rejected, pushed aside, but I've been watching, and I know that you're more than what they say you are. You have power, strength, and kindness, too. I'm not here to hurt you." Lyra looked at Zora, her soft blue eyes searching for answers. There was a quiet trust in her gaze, a belief that this human might be different, but Zora wasn't so sure. Trusting someone, especially a human, was not something she did easily. "And what do you want from us?" Zora asked, her voice sharper now, though a hint of curiosity crept into her words. The human's smile faded slightly, but his eyes remained warm. "I don't want anything," he said quietly. "I just want to help. I know how it feels to be out of place, to be misunderstood. I can't change the world for you, but I can offer you something none of the others can: acceptance. I don't care about your past, your powers, or your appearance. I just see two girls who deserve a chance." For a long moment, neither girl spoke. The words hung in the air, heavy with possibility. Zora couldn't remember the last time someone had spoken to them like this, without fear, without disgust, without seeing them as nothing more than creatures to be feared. She didn't know if she should believe him or if this was yet another cruel joke the universe had played on them. But Lyra, ever the optimist, could feel the truth in his words. "You really think we deserve a chance?" Lyra asked softly, her voice barely above a whisper, as if speaking louder might break the fragile moment they were sharing. The human nodded, his expression earnest. "Everyone deserves a chance. No one should be alone in this world." Zora glanced at Lyra, her fierce, wild nature battling with the pull of the human's words. For a moment, she could almost believe it. A chance. A world where they didn't have to hide, where they didn't have to fight for their place. Could it really be possible? "I'm not asking for you to trust me," the human continued, his voice growing softer. "But I can help you. I know a place away from here, where no one will judge you, where you can be who you are without fear. You won't have to hide. Anymore, you'll be free." Zora's mind raced. The world she had known had been nothing but rejection. The idea of freedom, of finding a place where they could belong, was too tempting to ignore. But it was also a dangerous promise. Trusting anyone, especially a human, could lead to more pain. She had learned that the hard way. But Lyra, ever the gentle soul, looked at the human with hope in her eyes. She had always believed in the possibility of good, and now, for the first time, she felt like they might have found it. Zora turned to Lyra, her expression unreadable. "What do you think?" she asked, her voice low. Lyra met her gaze, and for the first time in a long while, she smiled softly. I think we should give him a chance." Zora sighed, her heart heavy, with doubt but also with the smallest glimmer of hope. She had never been one to trust, but for Lyra, maybe it was worth trying. The human extended his hand, waiting for them to decide, and for the first time in a long while, the girls took a step forward, not in fear, but in the hope that maybe, just maybe, they had found someone who saw them for who they really were. The first meeting, the next few days passed in a strange haze of uncertainty and anticipation. The human, whose name turned out to be Elias, didn't push them. He simply waited, patient, understanding. Every time he visited, he brought with him a new gift: food, shelter, knowledge of places the girls had never seen. It wasn't much, but it was enough to keep their curiosity alive. Slowly, the walls they'd built around themselves started to crumble, piece by piece. Zora, however, was not an easy person to convince. She spent most of her time avoiding Elias, keeping her distance even when he was close by. She didn't trust easily, and even though there was something about him that felt different. She couldn't shake the feeling that she was walking into another trap. After all, nothing in her life had ever come easy. If someone was offering help, there had to be a catch. Lyra, on the other hand, found herself drawn to Elias. She found comfort in his presence, in his calmness. He didn't view them as outcasts or monsters. He saw them as they truly were to girls, trying to find their way in a world that had never cared about them. And in Ilias's eyes, she could see something that she hadn't seen in anyone else: hope. One evening, as the sun began to set, painting the ruins in shades of orange and purple, Elias invited them to a small clearing just outside the cities. Remnants. The place had once been full of life, but now it was just a quiet, hidden corner of the world, a place where no one would look for them. Zora was hesitant, her feet dragging as she followed behind Lyra. She didn't want to go. She didn't want to be seen, didn't want to risk trusting anyone. But Lyra's gentle, reassuring touch on her arm made it impossible to resist. "This is where I've been staying," Elias said as they reached the clearing. "It's safe here. No one will find us." The area was simple, but it had a peace that Zora hadn't felt in years. The trees, though twisted and gnarled, created a barrier that kept them hidden. In the distance, the broken city loomed, but here it felt as though the world was holding its breath. Zora looked around warily, her instincts still on high alert. But Lyra's eyes softened as she took in the beauty of the place. She breathed in the cool air, her heart lightening. For the first time, she allowed herself to relax, to believe that maybe, just maybe, this could be their chance for something better. Elias set down a blanket on the ground and gestured for them to sit. "I've been working on something for you both," he said. "Something to help you feel safe here." He pulled out a small, strange-looking device from his bag and placed it on the ground. It hummed quietly, glowing faintly in the dim light. "This is a shield. It will keep us hidden from the rest of the world. No one will find us as long as we stay within its range." Zora stared at the device with suspicion. "A shield?" she asked, her tone filled with doubt. "How can you trust that thing? It could be another trick." "I understand your hesitation," Elias said, his voice calm, "but I promise you it's not a trick. I've spent years working with technology like this. It's safe." Zora crossed her arms, still not convinced. "And why should we believe you? What do you want from us?" Elias sighed, sitting down across from them. His green eyes looked deep into hers, as though searching for the right words. "I don't want anything from you. I'm offering you a chance, because I know what it's like to be alone, to be rejected. I've seen how the world treats people who don't fit in, but I also know that everyone deserves a place. You deserve a place, too." For a long time, there was silence. Zora's mind raced, torn between the need to protect herself and the pull of Elias's words. She had never been given the chance to feel safe, to feel like she belonged, but was that a good enough reason to trust him? Lyra, sitting beside her, placed a gentle hand on Zora's arm. "Maybe this is the chance we've been waiting for, Zora. Maybe it's time to let someone in." Zora turned to look at Lyra, her expression unreadable. She didn't know what to say. She didn't know if she could believe in what Elias was offering. But Lyra's soft eyes, full of hope, made her heart ache. Finally, Zora sighed, her guard slowly starting to come down. "Fine," she muttered, looking at Elias. "We'll stay, but we're not trusting you yet." Elias smiled, a look of relief washing over his face. "That's all I ask. Take your time." As the night drew on, they sat together in the clearing, the shield humming softly around them. The stars twinkled above, but for the first time in a long time, the girls didn't feel alone. Elias had given them a glimpse of something they hadn't dared to hope for, a place where they could belong, where they didn't have to hide who they were. It wasn't much, but it was a start. Zora still wasn't sure about Elias. She wasn't sure about anything. But for the first time, she allowed herself to wonder, could this be real? Could they truly have found a place where they were accepted, not as aliens, not as outcasts, but simply as themselves? The night was quiet, peaceful, and as they sat under the stars, Zora and Lyra both felt something they hadn't felt in years. Sliver of hope. The struggle for acceptance, the days following their decision to stay in Elias's hidden refuge, were a mix of caution and curiosity. The girls spent their time exploring the boundaries of the new safe zone, trying to feel out the truth of Elias's promise. For the first time, they weren't constantly looking over their shoulders, expecting someone to hunt them down. But as much as they appreciated the peace, Zora's suspicion remained thick in the air, clouding her every move. Lyra, on the other hand, began to open up to the idea of belonging. Elias's kindness was like a soft light, something she hadn't felt in years. The shield he had set up worked better than they could have hoped. They were truly hidden, away from the prying eyes of a world that had no place for them. Still, Zora couldn't let go of her past. Every time she looked at Elias, she remembered the times others had made promises they didn't keep. She remembered the betrayals, the harsh words, and the fear. Trust was something Zora couldn't afford not anymore. The peaceful days began to feel like a fragile dream, one that could shatter at any moment. And it wasn't long before that fear came to life. One afternoon, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the ruined city, Elias received an urgent message on his communication device. It beeped loudly, breaking the stillness of the moment. His face fell as he read the message, his brow furrowing. "What is it?" Zora asked, already sensing that something was wrong. "They've found us," Elias said, his voice tight. "The people who have been searching for you." Lyra's eyes widened. "How? We're hidden." Elias's face was pale. "They've been tracking me for years. They know I've been helping you. They won't stop until they find you." Zora's heart pounded. She had known it was only a matter of time. There was no escaping the past, no escaping the fear that followed them. It was only a matter of time before someone realized the girls weren't just runaway aliens. They were something more, something powerful. "What do we do?" Lyra asked, her voice trembling. Elias's expression softened, but there was determination in his eyes. "We fight back. We don't let them take." "You?" Zora looked at him with a mixture of disbelief and anger. "You think we can fight them? We've been running our entire lives, hiding in the shadows. We're no match for them." "They're not expecting you to fight," Elias said, his voice steady but urgent. "That's what will give you an advantage. They think you're weak, that you're nothing, but I know what you're capable of. Together, we can stop them." Zora stood up, pacing back and forth. She wasn't sure what to think. The idea of fighting again, of standing up to those who wanted to destroy them, was terrifying. But part of her couldn't deny the truth in Elias's words. They weren't weak. They weren't helpless. And maybe, just maybe, this was their chance to stop running. Lyra stood beside her, her eyes wide with fear, but also something else, hope. She looked at Zora and said, "Maybe we don't have to run anymore. Maybe it's time we show the world who we are." Zora stopped pacing. and looked at her. For the first time in days, she felt a spark of something other than fear. It was a feeling she hadn't allowed herself to feel in a long time. Maybe it was time to fight. Maybe it was time to take control of their destiny. But Zora still wasn't. Sure, they had been running for so long, surviving in the shadows. Could they really stand up to the world that had rejected them? As if on cue, Elias stood up and pulled a map from his bag, unfolding it on the ground between them. He pointed to a small, hidden location marked in red. This is where they'll be looking. If we move quickly, we can catch them off guard. Zora looked at the map, her mind spinning. Every part of her screamed that it was too dangerous. But deep down, she knew there was no turning back. They had come too far, and this was their chance to take control of their lives. She glanced at Lyra, whose eyes were filled with resolve. Zora exhaled slowly, her decision made. All right, we fight, but we do it on our terms. Elias smiled, a mix of pride and relief on his face. I knew you'd come around. The girls had always known fear. It had followed them like a shadow, keeping them on edge every waking moment. But now, as the weight of the decision pressed down on them, they realized something fear didn't have to control them. It had been a part of their survival, yes, but it didn't define them. They had the power to shape their future. In the days that followed, they prepared. Elias taught them how to defend themselves, using their strengths. To their advantage, Zora, with her wild energy, learned how to harness her anger, turning it into focused power. Lyra, with her gentleness, learned to use her calmness to create strategies that kept them one step ahead. And as the final day of preparation came, Zora stood at the edge of the forest, looking out over the city. She could feel the weight of what was to come, the unknown that lay ahead. But for the first time, she didn't feel like the world was closing in on her. She felt ready. We're ready, Zora said, her voice firm, filled with the strength that had been building inside her. Lyra stood beside her, nodding. Together, they weren't alone anymore. They had each other, and together, they could face anything the world threw at them. The turning point, the morning arrived like the calm before a storm. The air was thick with tension, and every sound felt amplified in the silence of the clearing. Elias had led the girls through the preparations, teaching them how to harness their strengths, but there was no denying the danger that loomed ahead. The world they had hoped to escape from was closing in on them once more, but this time they weren't going to run. They were going to fight. Zora stood at the edge of the clearing, looking out over the broken landscape that stretched before her. The city in the distance, where they had once hidden and sought shelter, now felt like a distant memory. It was no longer their home, and the people who once ruled it were no longer their concern. Today, the world would learn that they were no longer weak, no longer outcasts. Today, they would show the world what it meant to be truly seen. Zora's mind raced as she thought of everything that had led to this moment. The years of running, of hiding in the shadows, of being treated as nothing more than a mistake of nature. She had always fought to survive, but surviving wasn't enough anymore. She wanted more than that. She wanted to stand tall, to make a mark on the world. And for the first time, she felt the fire inside her, that burning desire to prove everyone wrong. Lyra stood beside her, her hand on Zora's shoulder. You're ready, she said softly, her voice filled with quiet confidence. Zora glanced at her, her fierce expression softening for a moment. I don't know if I am. This is different. We've never fought like this before. Not alone, Lyra replied. We've got each other. And we've got Elias. We're stronger than we've ever been. Zora nodded, taking a deep breath. She could feel the weight of the world on her shoulders, but Lyra's words, her unwavering belief, steadied her. Together, they had become something more. Together, they could face whatever came next. Elias appeared from behind a nearby tree, his face serious but calm. "It's time," he said. "They'll be here soon. We need to move quickly." Without another word, the three of them made their way through the forest, staying hidden under the cloak of Elias's shield. The hum of the device was barely audible now, blending with the sounds of nature. But underneath it all, Zora could feel the rush of adrenaline in her veins. Her senses were heightened, every movement sharp and calculated. This was it. This was the moment they had been preparing for. They reached the edge of the forest, where a small, abandoned structure lay hidden in the shadows. It was old, crumbling, and barely standing, but it provided them with the perfect vantage point. From here, they could see the road leading into the city, and soon, they would be able to see their enemies too. Elias positioned himself next to the girls, scanning the horizon. "They're coming," he said, his voice low. "Be ready, Zora's." Heart pounded as she peered out from their hiding place. She could see them now, figures moving through the dust, cloaked in dark armor. Their steps were deliberate, their movements precise. They were the ones who had been hunting them, the ones who wanted to silence them. But they wouldn't be able to do that today. Not today. Zora turned to Elias. "How do we fight them? We don't have weapons. We don't have an army. We're outnumbered." Elias looked at her, his expression calm but determined. "You don't need weapons. You have something far more powerful, your strength, your will to survive. And you have the element of surprise." Zora's eyes narrowed as she studied the enemy. She wasn't sure how they would do it, but Elias was right. She had her strength, and she wasn't afraid to use it. She wasn't alone anymore. She had Lyra by her side, and Elias, who had shown them both what it meant to believe in something greater than fear. The first enemy soldier came into view, walking closer to their position. Zora's pulse quickened. She could feel her muscles tense, ready to strike. But Lyra placed a hand on her arm, stopping her. "Wait," Lyra whispered. "Let them get closer. We need to strike when they least expect it." Zora nodded, forcing herself to stay calm. The soldier moved closer, unaware of the trap that was about to be sprung. Zora could feel the tension building, the silence heavy. With anticipation, as the soldier drew closer, Elias silently activated the shield around them. The shield buzzed, and suddenly the soldiers were within range. Zora moved without thinking, her body reacting on instinct. She launched herself at the first soldier, her strength surprising even her. She grabbed him by the arm, twisting it behind his back and sending him crashing to the ground with a force that left him gasping for breath. Lyra, with her calm demeanor, used her agility to disarm another soldier. She moved gracefully, her every step calculated, as if the world slowed around her. She took the soldier's weapon and used it against him, knocking him out with a well-placed strike. Elias, too, wasn't just a bystander. He had been training them, but now, in the heat of the moment, he showed his own strength. He incapacitated another soldier with a quick, precise move, using the element of surprise to his advantage. The remaining soldiers hesitated, unsure of how to respond. They had been expecting an easy capture, but instead, they found themselves face to face with three determined, powerful beings who weren't afraid to fight for their freedom. Zora felt the rush of victory But it wasn't over yet. The battle was just beginning, and for the first time in her life, she felt alive. She wasn't running anymore. She was fighting. She was in control. But even as they gained the upper hand, Zora knew there was still more to come. More enemies, more danger. The true battle had only just begun. The battle for freedom, the battlefield had shifted from a quiet, tense standoff to a full-blown clash. The first few moments were like a blur, filled with the rush of adrenaline and the sharp sound of metal clashing against the ground. Heart pounded in her chest as she fought with a fierceness she had never known. The enemies were relentless, but so were they. The girls, Elias, and their newfound strength had become something more than just survival they were fighting for. Their freedom, the soldiers, caught off guard by their strength, quickly regrouped. But the element of surprise had given them an advantage. Zora moved with a fluidity that was almost instinctual, her fists landing with precision, each strike sending shockwaves through her body. She had been running for so long that now, when the fight was at hand, she felt a sense of purpose she had never felt before. Lyra, though not as physically powerful as Zora, was just as determined. She had been trained to use her calmness to her advantage, and now, in the heat of battle, she was a force to be reckoned with. Her movements were quick and calculated, taking down one soldier after another with a grace that contrasted the chaos. Around her, she disarmed one opponent, knocking him out with a swift blow to the side of his head. Her blue eyes focused with unwavering determination. Elias fought beside them, not just as a teacher, but as an ally. His training had prepared them for this moment, but in the heat of battle, his calm nature came through, making him an unpredictable force. He disabled another soldier with a precise movement, his skill and experience evident in every action. His role was not just to protect them, but to show them that they were capable of standing on their own. The enemy soldiers, however, weren't willing to give up easily. They regrouped and tried to encircle them, their weapons drawn and ready. Zora's eyes scanned the battlefield, her pulse quickening as she realized they were outnumbered. Despite their successes, there were still too many of them. They couldn't keep this up for long. We need to move. Ilias shouted, his voice urgent. We can't hold them off forever. Zora nodded, her muscles aching, but her spirit unbroken. I know. Let's take them down quickly. Lyra and Elias, quickly, made their way to a higher vantage point on the crumbling structure, using the terrain to their advantage. From there, they could see the entire battlefield and coordinate their next move. Zora remained on the ground, fiercely protecting their position. Her movements were wild but controlled, a beautiful chaos as she fought off two soldiers at once. She wasn't just defending anymore, she was fighting for something more than herself. The enemy soldiers began to retreat, but they weren't giving up. They were regrouping, preparing for a final push. Zora could feel the heat of the moment. The first wave had been hard, but the second would be even harder. The enemy wasn't just fighting for victory, they were fighting to break them, to send them back into hiding. But the girls weren't backing down. They had fought too long to be free. We can't let them win. Zora muttered under her breath, her eyes narrowing with determination. She could feel the tide turning, the momentum shifting in their favor. The soldiers were scattered now, disorganized. Their hesitation was their downfall. Lyra, who had been watching the scene unfold, turned to Elias. We have to end this now. They won't stop until they have us. We need to push them back. Ilias nodded. He knew what they had to do. It wasn't just about defeating their enemies. It was about sending a message. Let's make it count. In a coordinated effort, the three of them sprang into action. Zora charged forward, her body moving like a force of nature. She hit one soldier with such power that he was knocked to the ground, unable to get up. Lyra followed behind, using her agility to disarm and disable another soldier with a quick, precise movement. Elias, ever the strategist, positioned himself on the flank, taking down one of the remaining soldiers with a well-timed strike. The enemy soldiers, now outnumbered and disoriented, began to retreat. They had underestimated their opponents. They had thought the alien girls were weak, too wild, too gentle to fight back. But now, they were learning the truth. The girls had more strength than anyone had ever given them credit for. With the final soldier falling to the ground, the battlefield fell silent, except for the heavy breathing of the three allies. The fight was over. The girls had won. Zora stood panting, her body covered in dust and dirt, but her heart was light. She looked around at the fallen soldiers, the weight of what they had just accomplished slowly sinking in. They had fought for their freedom and they had taken it. Lyra stepped up beside her, her face filled with exhaustion but also with relief. "We did it," she said quietly, her voice filled with awe. Zora looked at her, a small, rare smile forming on her lips. "We did." Elias approached them, his face also tired but filled with pride. "You two are incredible," he said, his voice warm with admiration. "I knew you could do it." Zora turned to him, her expression softened. "We couldn't have done it without you," she replied. "You gave us the strength to fight back." Elias nodded, his eyes filled with understanding. "No, you had the strength all along. I just helped you see it." The three of them stood together, the weight of the battle lifting off their shoulders. The world hadn't changed overnight, but something deep inside Zora had. They had fought not just for survival, but for something greater, for the freedom to live, to be who they were, without fear. They had shown the world that they weren't weak. They were strong, and they would never be pushed into the shadows again. But even as they celebrated their victory, a thought lingered in Zora's mind. This battle was won, but there were more to come. They had shown their strength, but they still had to prove that they belonged, that they could live freely in a world that had once rejected them. The fight for their future wasn't over, but for the first time, Zora believed they might just have a chance. A new beginning. The dust of the battlefield was still settling. The remnants of their enemies lying scattered across the ground. The air felt charged, a mix of exhaustion and relief hanging in the silence. Zora stood tall, her chest heaving from the fight, but there was a fire in her eyes, an ember that had been sparked and was now burning brighter than ever. The victory had been hard won, but it was theirs. The world had underestimated them, but now they had shown their true power. Lyra, standing beside her, shared a quiet smile, her soft eyes reflecting the weight of their success. It wasn't just about the fight. It wasn't just about surviving anymore. It was about reclaiming something they had lost long ago, their place in the world, their right to exist as they were, without fear of judgment or rejection. Elias approached them, his face tired but proud. He had been the one to help them realize their potential, but it was clear to him now that they had always had it. They had always been capable. He had only needed to give them the opportunity to see it for themselves. "You too," he said, his voice thick with admiration. "You're stronger than I could have imagined. I knew you had it in you." Zora glanced at him, the usual hard edge in her expression softened by the truth of his words. "You gave us a chance," she replied, her voice steady, but there was something deeper in it, now a recognition of the bond that had formed between them. But we did the rest ourselves. Elias smiled, a hint of relief washing over him. That's what I wanted you to see. You're capable of so much more than you know. Zora nodded slowly, her gaze drifting back to the battlefield where the fight had taken place. It felt surreal, almost impossible. Just a few days ago, they were running, hiding in the shadows. And now, they had fought back, defeated those who sought to control them. They had taken back their freedom. But as she stood there, taking in the weight of what they had accomplished, a new thought began to form in her mind. The fight was over, yes, but what now? What came next? What happens now? She asked quietly, her eyes never leaving the scene in front of her. Lyra stepped beside her, offering a reassuring smile. We rebuild. We find our place. We don't run anymore. Zora, we live. Elias nodded. That's right. You've taken the first step. Now, it's time to take the next. Zora turned to him, her eyes hardening with resolve. And what's the next step? The world may not accept you right away, Elias said, his voice calm but firm. There are still people out there who will try to tear you down, to put you back in the shadows. But you've shown them that you're not weak. You've shown them that you won't be pushed around. Zora's heart clenched at the thought. She wasn't afraid of the world anymore. She was ready to face whatever came next, to fight if she had to. But she also understood that there was something bigger than just survival. It was about living on their own terms. They didn't have to hide anymore. But we're not alone anymore, Lyra said, her voice light and full of hope. We have each other, and we have Elias. And that's more than enough. Zora smiled, the tightness in her chest loosening. For the first time in a long time, she felt a flicker of peace. There was hope in her heart. Maybe, just maybe, they could have a future they controlled. Not one dictated by the world's rejection. Elias stepped back, giving them a moment of space. It's going to take time, he said, his voice softening. But together, you can build a new future. One where you're free. One where you're not just surviving, but thriving. Zora turned to face Lyra, and in that moment, all the walls she had built around herself, walls of anger, fear, and distrust seemed to dissolve. Lyra had been right all along. They had never been alone. Not truly, they had each other. We'll make it, Zora said, her voice strong, filled with an unwavering determination. Together, with that, they turned their backs on the battlefield, walking away from the destruction and towards something new. A new beginning. A chance to create their own destiny, to carve out a place for themselves in a world that had never accepted them. It wouldn't be easy, and it wouldn't happen overnight. But they were ready. They had proven to themselves and to the world that they had the strength to face whatever came next. As they walked, side by side, into the future, the sun began to set, casting a warm glow over the ruins. The world was changing, and so were they, and this time, they weren't running. They were building, and no one, no matter how powerful or ruthless, could take that away from them.